All of us would like to be Challenger, right? We can tell our parents about it, our friends, we can brag about it in the schoolyard. But at the end of the day, guys, the Challenger recipe, what actually constitutes being a Challenger player, only Challenger players know about, and that's a very small percentage in the world. So today, I'm going to tell you exactly what is part of the Challenger recipe, and I'm kind of going to give you like a grading system, if you will, so you can actually self-analyze your own games and actually know exactly what it is you have to work on to improve and hopefully get to the peak of the mountain. Now, why should you listen to me? Well, I've coached every role to Challenger. I've also coached rank 1 EU West players against some of the best players in the world. So if you want to know what the secret ingredients are, make sure you stick around for the whole video. And if you do want to further your education, if you will, on the Rift, make sure you check out the GameLeap.com website in the description comment section, because our library of content, our videos that are uploaded daily, they are made by the best Challenger players and coaches around the world to help you become one of them. So if you want to take your game to that next level in Season 12, get that exclusive access by signing up, and let's get into the video. Now, first of all, we're going to split this video into two parts, guys. So in terms of the actual Challenger recipe, there are two things. There's micro, there's macro. So first of all, we will start by talking about micro, and this is pretty much any intensive thing that you're doing with your clicks, so on your mouse or your keyboard. Now, the first ingredient, which is the most important one, is your clicking precision. So what I mean by this is how comfortable you look actually playing the game, because I've coached so many students at this point, hundreds of them, and I'd say for the majority of them, it just looks awkward watching them. So in terms of them moving their mouse, often the sensitivity is way too high. So I'd highly recommend going in your game settings and turning down your mouse speed by 5, maybe 10, because that will give you more control. The lower your sensitivity is, typically anyway, the easier, the more comfortable it will feel. So that's the first thing. And I would say the same thing for your camera speed as well. So when you're moving your camera speed with your mouse, some people move it so quickly that they end up looking at a completely different lane during a fight. This is obviously not good, so I'd recommend turning that down by 5 or 10 as well. If you watch Faker play or Showmaker, any of the top players, right, it looks as if they're in so much control. That's because they're playing with what's comfortable for them, not just using some settings that suit someone else. You have to find the right settings for you. This will help your clicking precision accuracy. And also a couple more things that will help you in terms of your clicking precision and micro generally. Well, first of all, your hotkeys. Now, so many people, for whatever reason, don't have a hotkey for their shop. They don't have a hotkey for leveling up skills. This is essential. You don't want to have to move your mouse down to the gold at the bottom of your HUD. You don't want to have to move your mouse onto the shopkeeper. You don't want to have to level up your ultimate when you hit level 6 in a 1v1 top lane. These are just bad habits that are easily fixable. Simply get into a practice tool and get used to pressing that new hotkey. Get used to leveling up your skills with your eyes closed, pressing Control Q, Control W. Whatever your hotkey is, get used to it, create the muscle memory. Also, the last tip here that will definitely help all of you out, and I've seen players even in Diamond Elo not smart cast or quick cast their abilities. They have everything on normal cast, and the issue with that is that you're not really playing the game off your intuition. It's almost like when you see that normal cast and the actual ability indicator, it's like the game is questioning your instinct. It's like, I've already pressed it, bro, can you just use it? So smart cast or quick cast your abilities, this will just feel cleaner and quicker. The only real abilities I'd say you don't need smart cast for, Rumble Ultimate and Victor's Death Ray. That is pretty much it. Everything else smart cast, it will feel so much better. Now, the second micro ingredient, this is cooldown awareness. Now, this is one of the most important parts during the laning phase and game itself, because during the laning phase, whether you're 1v1ing or 2v2ing, depending on the lane you're in, you have to understand what cooldowns the enemy champion has and the actual timer that will be on once they use it, because that changes the dynamic of a lane. A Darius without his apprehend, his E, is very different to a Darius with his E. A Blitzcrank with his hook is very different to a Blitzcrank without his rocket grab. So before going into a game, guys, I'd even just recommend going on the LoL wiki page, looking up the cooldowns of the champions you're playing against, even ultimates as well. When you're team fighting, 4v4ing, 5v5ing around objectives, especially if you're an AD carry, you have to know what cooldowns the enemy champions have and what you need to look out for. During the laning phase as well, you could even include runes in here. So bone plating, clicking on the enemy champion and looking at their HUD in the top left of your screen. Is their bone plating close to coming off cooldown? Should I trade around this? Maybe your mana flow band is very close to coming back up. So instead of using your cooldowns a second before your mana flow band comes off cooldown, you wait a second and then you use your cooldowns with your mana flow band. Same thing can be applied with electrocute. Also using your own cooldowns. Let's say you're playing LeBlanc and your W is about to come off cooldown. You don't really want to throw a Q out when you could just wait a second or two and then you can QW instantly. So not only being aware of the enemy champion's cooldowns, but also aware of your own and how to synergize your own cooldowns to the maximum effect. This is also crucial in terms of your micro. Now, the final micro ingredient that you have to understand and perfect if you want to get to Challenger is positioning and spacing. Now, of course, I'm talking about laning here, so jungling is definitely going to be different, but positioning and spacing during the laning phase, you have to think like about your lane being on a circular axis, if you will. So for example, in the bot lane, if the enemy Blitzcrank is in one of the bottom brushes, if you're an AD carry, you are not going to stand on the same line as him. So along that bottom brush line, you are going to stand on the opposite side of the lane. This means that you create the most amount of space as possible from that big threat so you can actually play the game. Same thing with mid lane as well. If the enemy champion is moving north or south, you move the other direction. Now you do have to be a little bit careful, especially in the mid lane or even top lane, about getting pushed towards the enemy jungler. Some people can really five-head this, but that is typically how positioning works. You are on a permanent axis with the enemy champion. Most people are just going to play lanes in the middle. They just run forwards and backwards, but if you open yourself up to these different angles, you can escape more ganks, you can make more plays, you maintain contact with the minion waves a lot more. So this is also essential. And in terms of your spacing here, I've included this with positioning. Spacing just means how close you're standing to the enemy champions and maybe enemy threats. So understanding the enemy champion's range, not just for their auto attacks, but abilities, everything, right? How far away can you stand without getting hit? And ideally, you really want to stand on that limit, just on the precipice of their range, because this will give you the most amount of opportunity to pressure them and punish their mistakes. If you're standing way too far back, well away from that spacing optimal range, you're not going to do anything during the laning phase. You're playing way too safe and way too passive. So those are the key micro ingredients. Now, some of the macro ingredients, guys, we're about to get into. So these macro concepts, and there are 6 of them, it's really about game knowledge and then just actually executing it. So back timing. This, in other words, is just tempo. So I know lots of people like to complicate tempo and they try to make themselves sound hella smart. Pretty much all it is when you're pressing recall. That's it. So it doesn't even matter what role you're playing. This is for every single role in the game. If your lane opponent or your jungle opponent is recalling or they die, you want to try to match them. And the key point here is that when you base, what are you actually doing? Okay, so you're regenerating HP and mana, but what are you also doing? You're buying items. You are spending gold. Because if we think about it, guys, when we talk about who's fed in a game, we talk about, well, who's got the most gold, right? They have the most items. And because of that as well, they probably have the highest level. So if we don't recall ourselves, if we stay on the map and the enemy champion is allowed to come back to lane with their new items, with their new gold spend, we are actually behind them. Because we could be the champion who has 2 kills and 0 deaths. But those 2 kills, because they're giving us gold, they only matter when we spend it. So knowing when to base based on your lane opponent is absolutely essential. And I would also say here, you guys should memorize every single gold value for the items you're going to buy. So for example, if you're playing a mage in the mid lane and you have an amp tone, you should know that Lost Chapter is 865 gold. You should know that Lucidity Boots are 950 gold. If you're a top laner, you should know that Balmy Cinder is 1000 gold. You should know that Whip is 1100 gold. If you're playing Tryndamere, Berserker Screes, 1100 gold. You need to run out a base with a number in mind. Even say it out loud. Trust me, it will help. It will help you formulate a plan. And just by knowing this, you're not going to base too late or too early. You will hopefully optimize your recalls. Now, the next macro concept, kind of simple, this one, communication. So lots of players, even in high reloads, they don't communicate enough. Now, I would encourage you, in fact, I challenge any of you to type in on YouTube, Korean Challenger game, something like that, right? And you click on it. Now, if you skip to around 15 minutes, I want you to tell me how many pings you see in a 10-second span, because there will be 10, 20 times more in that 10-second span than there will be in an entire gold game. Now, why is communication so important? Well, by pinging information, it's really the only way we have to talk to our teammates. And at the end of the day, this is a team game. It's 5v5. So if we're not pinging crucial information, it's almost like we're withholding information from our teammates. Of course, we don't want this. We don't want to sabotage our team. So by communicating even little stuff, guys, like cooldowns, like ultimates, timing flashes in chat, pinging Dragon when it's up in 1 minute time, pinging Elder Dragon when it's up or Baron, pinging the top tower because it's the main objective you want to get, pinging the enemy red buff, asking for assistance, on the way pinging to a certain point in the map. All of this, if you don't do it, there is no way you are going to reach the summit. Guarantee it. Now, next up is a fairly simple one. This is just map awareness. So even players I coach in Diamond and Master and above, I don't think they know they have a map. And you might be like, well, how are they Master or Diamond? Well, it's because they do a lot of the other things we've talked about very well. So in terms of the micros specifically, they know matchups, their clicks are really good, they know cooldowns, positioning, spacing, all that's really clean. But sometimes the reason they lose games is simply because they don't look at their map. They don't understand what the objective is. They don't understand what lane to go to. And this is kind of related to the next macro concept, this being map movements. So where you're moving on the map, because the map, guys, at the end of the day, is your best friend. It is the big communicator you have in a game, because if we think about it, the map is everything in League. We are playing on a map. We are playing on Summoner's Rift. So if you don't know what's happening on the map, if you don't know what the map is telling you, you are going to be lost. You are going to play inefficiently. You are going to miss golden experience. And as a result, especially if your opponent is playing at that level, you are going to fall behind and just get outplayed. And of course, we can do another video going into these concepts. It's very easy for me just to sit here and say, have some map awareness, but training training your eyes, because at the end of the day, your eyes are a muscle, to look at the map every so often and try to figure out what's going on. Do we go for the Rift-Tailed here? Do we go for the Dragon? What lane do I have to go to? Can we invade this red buff? Oh, I don't have Prio in mid lane. It's probably a little bit too risky. These are the ideas you have to be aware of. You don't just run to lane and that's it, you turn your brain off. Your brain and your connection with the map has to be on at all times. Now, the penultimate macro ingredient, this is warding, or vision, whatever you want to call it. So warding, when do you ward? How do you ward? These are important questions. So the lower elo you go, players will just not ward. But the higher elo you go, they are going to ward after the second wave, so around the 230 mark, because that's the level 3 gank timer. Even if you're playing against a Jarvan or maybe a level 2 ganker, you might consider warding around that Raptors red buff area so you don't get level 2 ganked. Or maybe you're playing against a Blitzcrank Samira bot lane. You don't want to walk into one of the bottom brushes before the minions spawn because you might die. So as a support, you might run out to the bot lane, ward the middle brush immediately, and all of a sudden there's no threat there. So you're warding against the enemy threats, guys. And most of the time as well, let me just say this, you shouldn't need a ward to actually tell you where the enemy champions are. Lots of people get baited actually by their own trinkets or the controllers they have in their inventory. But if you understand how the map works, you should be able to figure out where the enemy champions are, especially based on the enemy champion's body language, if you will. So for example, if the enemy support randomly starts running at you and they haven't done that for the first 5 minutes, their jungler is probably there. Or maybe there's a situation where your jungler and top laner dive the enemy top laner in a 2v1. The enemy jungler doesn't show up, so if they don't show up for that play, they're probably on the other side of the map, maybe doing dragon or looking at your bot lane. So warding for sure is a core component of the game, and it is very important to know when to ward, where to ward, all of these ideas. And the last macro ingredient you have to become a challenger player, this is wave management. And I'm sure we can do a video on this, but wave management, well, waves are everything. I talked about in yesterday's video how waves become even more important the later the game goes. So it's not even about just managing waves. So whether you're freezing, slow pushing, hard pushing, whatever form of wave management you are employing, are you actually getting as many waves as possible? Also, in terms of your back timing, we can kind of intertwine these two ingredients. Your back timing has to also consider the wave. So when you get back to lane in 30 seconds, a minute's time, is the wave going to be in a good position for you or a better position for your opponent? So before we base, we might have to sort out the wave. Also, in terms of freezing and slow pushing and hard pushing, how do we do all of these? So how you manage minion waves, this is another crucial ingredient in the challenger recipe. I'm sure we've all played top lane once and the enemy Darius freezes on us and he's already killed us a couple of times. That's GG, game over. We can't play the game, we log on to another account. So it can be a massive difference between challengers and everyone else just because they see a certain pattern with the minions that you might not. So those were the ingredients, guys, the micro, the macro ingredients. You have to be good at all of these. Even someone in platinum or diamond, maybe even lower, you might be aware of all of these, but you only do them at a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 level. To get to the highest point, you need to do these all at around an 8, 9 out of 10 level at least. And of course, you can write these ingredients down and mark yourselves in the games you play. So how good was your clicking in this game? How good was your cooldown awareness? Maybe you died because you didn't realize the enemy mid laner was about to hit level 3 on the second minion of the third wave, and you died for it. Maybe you didn't place a ward down at 230, so the enemy jungler killed you. Maybe you missed out on a freeze at some point. Maybe your positioning was way too close to the enemy support, so you died for that. These are the things you can judge yourselves on, and hopefully this will give you the template to actually self-analyze your games and review them. So if you did enjoy this video, guys, and if you want more content like this, let us know by leaving a like down below. Any questions or comments about any of the things I talked about, leave them in the comment section. And until our next season 12 upload, this has been Coach G.